Hi everyone, my name is Brando Crawford and I'm here today with Chibuike, who is running for trustee. And typically I share some first impressions at the beginning of this. Chibuike is a very charismatic individual. He reminds me of my best friend from high school. Just radiates positive energy. And yet I also see him as like a very presidential type. You know how to present yourself. You're a small business owner. You have kids here in Oak Park. You kind of have a wealth of experience and clearly have reasons to involve yourself in this election and hopefully become a trustee of the board. To start off this conversation, I wanted to know, why did you choose Oak Park?
Now, when you say choose Oak Park, do you mean choose to live here or choose to run?
Great question. I think that both. I know that there's a little bit of history with your family choosing Oak Park, which you can delve into, but I think understanding your continued choice to be in Oak Park and to involve yourself with the village of Oak Park.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think the biggest thing that, why I choose Oak Park and why I continue to choose Oak Park today, even as I got dropped off in, a Lyft drive, the guy who drove me over here asked me if I was from here. And, always I'm prideful about Oak Park. And I said, I actually grew up here. This, right down here, as we made a turn coming this direction, my old high school is right over there. I used to sing barbershop quartet at Holmes Elementary School for some of our projects. So I have a connection here. And the coolest part about him asking me that question, it always reminded me that this is a place where I saw myself grow up and where I want to see my kids grow up. So I just have that connection of this is always a home feeling place, and it's a place of diverse culture. And having that diverse culture and knowing like you're from Argentina, I'm from Nigeria, I always think, when I think of that, I think of soccer and I think of just these cool parallels that we always can have, and we can draw together in differences, but that also bring us together. So
that's huge.
That's what I think.
Definitely. Yeah, I didn't even realize that connection. Football is big in both areas, and my mom's from Argentina originally. Your parents are both from Nigeria?
Yes.
So that's a fun connection. Also singing, I didn't realize that you sing barbershop quartet?
Yeah, I used to sing barbershop quartet when I was younger.
Hear it in your voice, you got this resonance.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that Oak Park helped me with too. Just being able to meet and talk to other people, and music is a universal language. So got to do a lot of that growing up. But yeah, as you said, why Oak Park? I think Oak Park is just that place where I feel at home, where I know that even my friends who don't live here always tell me if I'm going to start a family, I'm going to probably go to Oak Park.
Yeah.
And I don't ever think twice about it, because that's where I think if you want these same things, if you want to have that freedom of expression, to see people that look different from you, that have different color skin, that have different orientations, and that have different beliefs and can thrive.
Right.
In a community, there's very few communities that you can do that in outside of Oak Park and feel like yourself. So I just love that we can all feel that way, and I want to continue to make sure that my kids, and for generations to come, other kids feel like this is a place that they could call home, where they could feel safe, and where they could start their family.
I love that. Investing, I've met with different people who are running that all have their kids here, and I've even met with one person he's been here for 3 generations. But I love the fact that you're insinuating towards your family eventually investing in 3 or 4 or 5 and unlimited generations in this village, which is a very good reason to run. Mm-hmm. But when someone runs, they don't run necessarily because it's perfect. They run because it's the place that they want to drive their village in a certain direction. So why don't we start the conversation with, I know that you're running backed by groups that support progressive ideals. Therefore, you're not running on a slate with Anthony and Wanta, but you're backed by the same groups and have acknowledged that and are seen together publicly addressing issues like racial equity. Why don't we start with that topic?
Yeah, I think, like you said, you're seen with these groups, and what I think that means is we all have common goals. We all have this feeling inside of us that we all want to feel safe. We all want to be healthy. We all want to have the opportunity to thrive and be our best selves in the community that we live in. And these groups represent Oak Park, Activate Oak Park, Black residents of Oak Park. They're all groups that don't strive to push one person ahead of another person, but they're all striving for equality. They're all groups that want people to be held up together, not to have one person lifted up above and past and that kind of stuff. We want to have the same rights. We want to be able to thrive just as well as the next person next to us. Right. So I think equity, when we talk about equity, there's just so many parts to it. It's not that. Yeah, there's not just, hey, you know, let's just have, you know, equity in our housing. Let's just have equity in business. Let's have equity in schooling. There's so much different conversations that come from that I think when I talk about equity and I talk about that diversity being kind of celebrated throughout our community, that was what was here when I got here. When my parents brought us here, we used to have a festival that highlighted all of our differences. And I would get excited every year being a part of that festival, telling people about the Igbo tribe that we come from and our welcoming tradition of teaching people about who we are, our beliefs, but also learning about other people's beliefs and accepting people for their differences, which is something that as just a human we can all respect and understand, but that's something that's been in jeopardy recently due to events happening nationwide, but also events that are happening here in Oak Park. So yeah, you have...
Which is crazy, is crazy to think that it could happen locally, but it just shows how interconnected everything is.
Exactly.
And how a nation's mindset drives its people. I think that this is what I wanted to highlight with other candidates, and I don't know if we went as deeply into this direction, but I wanted to know, I think that your supporters and people who value diversity already support and understand at least the goals at a surface level. Yeah. But I know that there's residents who silently disagree or think we've already solved that problem in Oak Park. Residents that agree with you, have heard you speak before and know how eloquent you are on this topic. Yeah. What would you say to the residents that don't believe in white privilege or don't believe that certain institutions need to change? How would you present, I kind of giving you the opportunity through the screen of how would you present certain policies to these groups? And for some of them, they just may not be exposed to the information that's out there, and they may not be looking for it. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say, there's a lot of evidence that supports that equity hasn't been here in the way that we thought it would in Oak Park. Equity isn't just building, 200 and... How many units are in the Albion building?
Something along those. I know it's around $1 million in tax revenue.
$1 million in tax revenue, and you have hundreds of units. I think it's like 265 or something like that. 265 units. And I believe, I may be wrong, that out of those 265 units, 10% of those units were supposed to be given towards fair housing. Given towards a housing incentive that meant that 10% of those residents would not necessarily meet the standard of living there, but would be allowed to live in that situation. And what basically...
Creating some opportunity.
Yeah, creating more opportunity, but also more diversity. And bringing about neighbors that might not necessarily look exactly like the typical Oak Parker. And what that brought about, I believe these developers could pay $100,000 to not have that diverse unit be there anymore. So imagine if you could pay $100,000 to not have a black or brown neighbor because it made you, feel safer at the end of the day? Or what is the issue of having that person, having that extra family there, which is another family that could teach you diversity, that could teach you humanity.
Right.
These type of things happen, and you wonder, where did that dollar amount come from? Where did it become okay to pay $100,000 to not have that neighbor there?
Yeah, I mean, this is me hearing this information for the first time.
Yeah.
And so that's incredibly frustrating. Yeah. That sounds like, that's not incredibly frustrating. That sounds like a pretty racist practice, and I don't know how that went past the board. Exactly. That's pretty nuts.
Exactly. There's always something written in between the lines that, we don't get to see. Like, yes, we think when we're celebrating because we thought that we're doing something good here with equity, but just 10% isn't enough.
Right.
20%, 30%. Then you might really start to see some real change in this. And don't make it so that these developers can get off easy and pay $100,000 to X out that unit.
To clarify, are these These are more affordable units, correct?
Yes, more affordable units.
So is there like a quota for how many, for them, do they have to be towards people of color or minorities in the building?
I don't want to get in the weeds and missay any of that information.
Just to clarify.
It's definitely something worth looking into, and I know that by the time this comes out, I can have all the stats for it, and I'll pass it along. But
we'll put it in the description or somewhere below the video. Yeah, and so ultimately whether it be affordable housing or a quota for how many people can live in these buildings that may have a certain ethnicity or to try to balance out sort of like how universities do to create opportunities. Some people argue that is not necessarily the right way to approach it. Why do you think that is the right way to approach it, and why would you increase the quota or the amount, the percentage of units?
Fair housing came to Oak Park in 1968, and that was with the hopes of integrating these areas into areas that were more diverse, and which we've seen strides in, but it's not enough.
Right.
We still have just these large pockets of areas where, hey, you will always see black people along Austin. You will always see black people along Roosevelt and along Harlem and North Avenue. It's almost as if you're almost embarrassed to have that relations to your neighbors and people who actually live in this town. And so practices, were in place to keep that situation going on, but I think you now have more people and more eyes on this than ever to get that changed. But if we don't have village board trustees that can actually go in and implement laws and help to keep these practices from being executed, we're still going to run into those same traps again, and what happened in 1968 will mean nothing. We have to continue to grow to get that diversity.
So what I love that you're saying is that the Oak Park that we know and love, that everyone has chosen, is a result of these practices, basically. And what you're saying is that if we're going to continue to grow Oak Park, well, we should continue this tradition. It's almost like your views are not necessarily progressive, but like just practical and almost conserving what Oak Park is and has been. So people who are interested in seeing Oak Park retain those qualities, when it comes to these new buildings, these practices should be in place, number one, and improved upon. Because you notice that there's certain flaws that, affordable housing practices, fair housing practices existed in Oak Park, but created almost a pattern that we don't want to see patterns.
Yeah.
That's the point.
If you don't have money, we want you to stay on this side of Ridgeland and between Austin and
you're right. I know it because I've seen it. Because
exactly.
And that's a zoning thing. It all comes down to policy. It all comes down to the board.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement. I mean, even the Fair Housing Act alone can't solve all of our problems. We have to take this as an issue as a village, as a community. We have to say we're going to do better than that. And when people are coming looking to live in Oak Park, we have to have affordable housing options. That's another thing. It's just the cost of housing in Oak Park is not cheap by any means.
No.
And to see taxes continuously go up, it makes that burden continuously harder for the taxpayer in Oak Park. And
what do we do about that? How do we approach the 15% of the budget that goes towards, that you would control as a trustee or help control?
We have to lower that tax burden for the actual taxpayer. And some of the ways we can do that is to diversify that tax base. And the way that we diversify our tax base is to incentivize things like small business owners and really show that Oak Park is a home and a haven for small business owners to start up.
You have a wealth of experience. You're a small business owner yourself. What would you say is a pretty good, now to clarify, you're not a brick and mortar small business.
No.
You're someone who operates out of an Oak Park address.
Yes.
How would you incentivize further small businesses from your area of experience, but also not just the small businesses that operate like yours, but that rent in Oak Park?
Yeah. I think some of the ways that you can incentivize a small business owner into looking into Oak Park and making this a home for their business is you really have to start to think, hey, how can we help this business get off the ground? Some of the hardest things for businesses to do is procure loans.
Yeah.
So we have to get more small interest capital loans for our small businesses.
Yeah.
To figure out how much money we can afford to put aside a year for for these loan processes, but we also need to work with federal and state to get ourselves a loans and grants. We need to also help in that process because business owners don't always know exactly where to go or who to ask for these. And if you don't have that information, you just don't know.
Right.
And that's a big issue that I've learned talking to small business owners is they just don't know all of this. And there is no guide when you start your business in Oak Park that says, here's how to be successful.
Right.
We don't have a mentoring program with senior businesses that have been successful that help pass that knowledge on and help other businesses be successful. Yes, we have a chamber, but we need to have more resources for that chamber.
You're good, and the chamber is something that ultimately you have to buy into. And maybe the ones that aren't a member of the chamber, what is the outreach protocol?
Exactly.
That's certainly, you're right. And I didn't even think about loans and grants that could be available for small business owners from the federal and state level.
Yeah.
Like that's how I think deep our problems go. But let's continue on this trend and topic. Sometimes it's not just financial resources to open a business. We see a lot of businesses open and then close. And something is making them lose heart. I personally think that it's the interpretation of how small businesses are regulated compared to even 25 years ago. 25 years ago, my mom opened a small business as an immigrant, didn't speak English as a first language, and she says Oak Park made it pretty easy for her compared to recently. We reopened her small business in a new location and ran into some hurdles. I'm not saying that Oak Park wasn't great, because it was in certain ways, but there were ways that I could write on a listed sheet that they could improve on. So what are your thoughts? Can we simplify processes in Oak Park? How do we change the way that the village board interacts with our manager and changes that culture?
Yeah, I think for that culture, as you're saying, the best way to move forward would be how have we seen this be successful? Where in what towns do we see this become the most successful? And what parallels can we draw from those towns? We always, look to Evanston because they have a very similar demographic and usually have a very similar goal to what Oak Park is trying to accomplish when we talk about mottos and all those type of things. But what are they doing with their small businesses to keep them afloat? Because we've got to be able to see where our other people's strengths are and where other township strengths are and what we can draw from those. No one else had been through a pandemic before. We all went through this at the same time, but other villages had things in place which helped them to recover a little bit faster. Even River Forest had certain things in place to help their businesses be more successful in the event that this lasts longer than we expected it to, which it has for all of us.
You're right.
So why don't we make ordinances? Why don't we give help? Why don't we have funds to help out these small businesses for a longer than normal period? Because we can't just revisit every 2 weeks and say, hey, well, the pandemic's not done yet, so let's reconvene later and let's keep this in place.
I like to use an example because it's so easy for us to think like, in comparison to other communities, we're just in the same place. No, other places had funds, other places were prepared, and being prepared also meant for the small businesses to already have been thriving, which we weren't, because it's pretty hard to get a permit. It's pretty hard to get a loan. There's so many boards. There's so many processes, and it's not very non-English speaker friendly or someone who doesn't have the right credit score. There's certain things that just need to be addressed and looked at. And like I was even talking to Dino. It's like both of us learned English pretty young or speak English as a first language. But I come from an immigrant mom, and it's just interesting. It was so hard for us. I couldn't have imagined if my mom did this by herself. She says she couldn't have done it. I think that she could have. But looking at the processes, maybe it was a big enough hurdle where she couldn't have by herself, and that's really frustrating because then that is a problem with racial equity and diversity, and it needs to be addressed by people who understand those problems.
Exactly. But that's where I think Oak Park can be better. We have a wealth of knowledge and resources and people willing to take that time, but it's how do we organize? How do we put the right people together with the right mentors, which is just something that's been in my life the whole time. I've always been lucky enough to been pointed in the right direction of mentors, coaches, people who can help me to articulate what I'm trying to do and understand what direction I need to go in order to get myself there. Mm-hmm. And so that has to happen on the level of small business. We have to make sure that we're partnering our small businesses together with the right organizations, with the right funds, with the right government entities to figure out what we can possibly do to make sure that you don't bottom out, to make sure that this business is still here after COVID and is able to thrive and get themselves back to where they need to be.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love that you're pointing out, grants and the such, changing the culture at the Village Hall, just having a board that is keeping that at the forefront and creating opportunities for the disenfranchised. It all makes sense. Anything else on that topic before we move to development?
Yeah, I think, if anything, like I said, recent events with in regards, some of these racial issues we faced in Oak Park, what I was able to see from the business owners that were right around Live Cafe was something that brought me to tears, to be able to see the business owners that were from that area, right on that block, right there, providing food, providing, coffee, providing just comfort and being there for their fellow business
environment.
It made me feel a type of way about Oak Parkers that maybe, we are going to be doing a lot better than we think we will be doing. It's very affirming to see that people care, not just the people, but the business owners. Because I think we sometimes separate them and forget that a lot of the business owners that own businesses in Oak Park live in Oak Park. So not only are they paying property taxes for their property, but they're also paying taxes for their small business. So they're double lifting up this community. And it isn't just on the community to save the small business. People are struggling. There's people who can't afford to pay their rent right now, and they're struggling just as hard. And to put the burden on them to keep all of our small businesses running is a task that I would never put on anyone. No. But I do believe that as a unit, as a community, we can come together. We can make sure that we have trustees that are in office, and when they are in office, that they're going to address how we make sure that we hold our small businesses up and put them at the forefront and help them. They're double taxed. They're carrying a lot of burden for us, and we need to make sure that we're supporting them and they get through this. Right,
because in reality, when a small business closes, it's a very literal effect on everyone. It's less tax revenue, frankly. Or a vacant property usually gets assessed much lower than one that is with a thriving anchor tenant. I think that Oak Park, one thing that I would like to see is, like, for example, we're paying all of our taxes here at this. It's the highest tax private residence in Oak Park, and yet sometimes we're treated in such a way where we're like, well, we could just go nonprofit, not pay taxes, and call it a day. But I still have hope. I still have hope for Oak Park, and that's why we're here in this position. We're like, well, I'd like to see representatives that change the way that small businesses are dealt with, because if not, if in a corporation, which we talked about this a little bit beforehand, Oak Park not only is structured like a corporation, but very much acts like an aloof one. You've got the board focusing on these big accomplishments, the new giant development with $1 million in tax revenue that seems good but has its own problems. But it's like small business owners sometimes fall by the wayside like necessary employees, and employees need more reasons to stay than to leave. And right now, and for the past maybe 10 years, hasn't quite felt that way in Oak Park. And I say that on behalf of every small business that is closed, that has told me that the reason why they closed is because they lost heart. It's not because it wasn't just one thing. Maybe they got the taxes, the way that it was increasing, changed their net revenue significantly. Maybe it was a permit that took 3 months to get, and or they were denied. I remember Great Harvest, which this is awesome. We both have that history in Oak Park. So Great Harvest, I know that when I talked to her, it was about losing heart, and I heard about some of the things that were going on. I'd love to have her on for a podcast because she could have seen more support from the Village of Oak Park.
Oh man!
And that's why she ended up. Her next job was with the Chamber of Commerce, trying to be that change she wanted to see. But it really takes a cultural shift, and who guides the manager? Who does the manager answer to, and who does the staff answer to? These people who are regulating us, to the board. And so if we have an awesome board, with members like you that have these views, it'll be an upward battle because you still have to change people's minds. But at the end of the day, it's your call. You can say, as a board, approach businesses in this manner.
Yeah.
And it's the end of the day. That's what it is. It is what it is. And if not, people get cycled in and out. And that's what happened, with the last village manager. He got cycled out, and so far, there's been some great moments, there's been some not so great moments. I'd love to see none of the staff be cycled out because I love them all. I'd love to see just the board and them work to create a super, super environment for small businesses. That's a little bit that was a lot from me. Sorry to kind of jump in, but I'm so passionate about that.
Exactly.
Why don't we switch to development so I don't freak out again?
It's okay.
So I don't go crazy.
You want to talk about the things you're passionate about, and I applaud that. I mean, it's why we're here. We want to talk about what we can do to make things better in our circumstances. You're a small business owner, so I completely understand. I think, especially when it comes to development, we've talked about it before. Oak Park's board before chose to go with very, very large developments.
This past board has been going crazy.
And if we're going to do that, if we're going to go towards development, I think we need to go a lot smaller. We talk about how we would want to see Oak Park. I would want to see more units that were available and more affordable for the average person. Okay. Everything in that building that you're talking about was over $1,700 or $1,800 per unit. That singles out a lot of people just off the bat when you hear that price alone. Right. You might as well buy a house, So you're running into that situation. Maybe these people don't want to buy a home, but you're outpricing it so that just the top percent of people or income earners can get those houses.
Can I challenge you on this just to kind of come to the more nuanced opinion that I know that you're. So some people might argue that if we did that would bring down the prices of all the other rents in Oak Park relative to the tax revenue that we make isn't functional. And so they say that the real gap in the market was people who wanted luxurious units, and by creating those, that allows for things to be priced at the cost that it should be. Presumably you disagree with that?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your explanation on that.
You can't just imagine if it's hungry. You can't just throw food on the street and say, hey, if you're hungry, here's food. You can't just build this big building and say, well, now we needed revenue and we didn't want to bring down property value, so we built one big building. Mm-hmm. That's not going to fix all of the issues that we have.
I like that analogy,
What we do have right now, and when I say small development, I'm saying small development that you yourself could do as a homeowner. I'm saying that we need to get a little bit more loose with how we have dwellings that are unattached to homeowners. That not only brings up your property value, but that also gives you an additional source of income because you can rent out that area. You can do that as a regular homeowner if we ease up on some of these issues.
That's so right. This is awesome. I love this because this is something no one has talked about. So you're talking about loosening up a little bit on zoning regulations. Yeah. Letting a homeowner of a single family home rent out part of the home to someone else.
Yeah.
Or a coach house, or
exactly.
Which is really hard in Oak Park.
Yeah, because we've created that for ourselves.
That's right.
And
love this.
Why did we create that for ourselves? I don't know. I'm not going to presume to say I know exactly why, but there's ways we can work around this.
You shared a story with me about your, was it brother or cousin?
Mm-hmm. Cousin. Yeah.
And in pre-conversation.
Yeah.
About someone who wanted to create a certain net worth for themselves. It's creating new generational wealth, which is very, I like that. I respect that. I'm doing it for my own family. My mom did it for us because she didn't inherit any money. And I think that's super respectable. And yet, one of the points in development that you were making was that we need opportunities for the smaller guys to develop and create wealth for themselves and for their family.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I think another way in which we work on developing that wealth, and like you said before, generational wealth isn't something that, an immigrant normally has, especially me. And I don't know if you were handed down, anything, but, I literally can tell you that it was something that was never just given to me. You have to work and earn for whatever it is you do keep. And what I was alluding to before was that if you want to continue to create equity for yourself, there should be more opportunities. How about, like we said before, diversifying that tax base? Diversifying that base would be getting more small business owners. But small business doesn't have to be a brick and mortar. Small business can be real estate.
Right.
So that can be you buying or helping to be part of a development where you say, hey, I want small development. I want a couple of units. I want something that's under 3 stories.
Which is genius, because then that also creates, it's if our developers are locals, then that means that whatever, you're increasing the tax revenue, but then you're also creating a wealthier person in Oak Park who's going to spend locally.
Exactly.
It's huge.
You don't have fleeting dollars. You don't have people who leave here to spend that money. And then those small businesses that were struggling before, we have more people here who are actually going to be using those services. So I think it works hand in hand. But like I said, we need to have people on the village board who are willing to think a little bit outside of the box. Where I've worked in the past has allowed me to think outside of the box. I've worked for major corporations and understood that we can't capture an audience doing the same thing that we do every day.
No.
You have to really be willing to walk us across the aisle and say, hey, I know that we're not meeting right here on A and B, but C, that's something that we have in common.
Yeah.
That's something we can work on together. How do we get there?
Right.
And then from that relationship, maybe something else transpires and you start to have more difficult conversations, but those difficult conversations can bear really good fruit. So let's start doing some of those things. Let's have people who are willing to work together on the village board, that are willing to think about everyone. I want people to remember that the job of our village and the job of Oak Park is to listen to all of our voices, so that each of us can benefit, not just so that some of us can benefit. And government isn't to just listen. Government is to listen and react.
Right.
We cannot just sit here and say, oh man, that's messed up, and then go back to watching the game. No, we have to say, you know what, that's messed up. We need to do something about this.
I love that.
How do we work together to make this not this problem anymore?
Right. Well, I think that it's incredible. You have very articulate, to the point, with examples on all these subjects, whereas other people are very general. They have a theme that they're kind of exploring. You know exactly what you want to explore. I like that a lot. I think we need a lot more of that. Now, so we talked about development, small business, racial equity, the budget. Any kind of, closing thoughts or something that you wanted to talk about that really, you want your voter base or potential voter base or someone who's listening who's undecided, what would you like for them to hear about you?
I want voters to know I am as genuine as I possibly can be. This job doesn't, I don't even know. I think we always go, every time I have the conversation about what the job pays, it's a part-time job. So it's gone from I think someone said 16,000. Now every time I get done, it's lower. So I think we're at 12,000 a year or something.
It's not for the money, for sure.
So it's not for the money. I don't personally benefit from any of this. I want to make sure that this is a place, like I said, where I can see my kids grow and where they can say, you know what, I want to live here, and this is actually affordable for me to live here. So that dream isn't just a dream, it's something that you can see as a reality. I didn't even know when I first came back if living in Oak Park would be possible, because I already know how high things can be, and I've seen my parents struggle with mortgage. So I know that that's not something that is easy for anyone. And the tax brackets, you already know, the tax brackets in Oak Park are through the roof. It's, my main focus for people here in Oak Park is for them to know that I'm here to listen to you. I am one of you. I want you to know that my investment in Oak Park isn't just in a property that I live in. It's in the people that live around me. It's in the friends of my son and my daughter. It's in all of the people that live here. We want more and we want better for all of our residents. It's not just, not just the disabled, it's not just gay, it's not just lesbian, it's not just black, it's not just white. We all want these things. It's something that was promised to us, and it's not just promised for one individual group of people. This is for all people. So we want to make sure, and I want to make sure, that I represent Oak Park to the best of my ability, and that I take your needs and your concerns seriously, and they're not going to fall on deaf ears. I'm here to be with you through the long haul. That's all I got.
I love that. I love that so much. It's a perfect statement. It's definitely coming from your heart. You know, I think that you're a genuine person. You seem like you'd be like a great neighbor to have. Like if you were the next door neighbor, I would be like, you know, probably like inviting you over and like hanging out with you. And I think that people should elect people that they would want to spend time with, because we're going to be spending time with whoever is on the board for the next 4 years. So thank you again very much, and thank you for coming here and for your time.
Oh,
Blessings.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.